Thanks to Ben Crawford for that piece. Now let's bring in our Wednesday political panel from Western Sydney, Liberal MP Melissa McIntosh, and from Adelaide, Labor Senator Marielle Smith. Welcome to both of you. We'll get to Afghanistan in a second, but I do want to start with the coronavirus situation, particularly with Melissa McIntosh in lockdown like all of New South Wales currently is. You are out in Western Sydney. I want to ask you about the situation on the ground in your community. Are people fearful that this is the new normal in a way, that there's no getting back from this situation now that we're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases, new cases recorded each and every day?
Certainly been very tough in Western Sydney, Matthew. We've been in lockdown and part of our LGA of Penrith is undergoing some of those stricter health measures by the New South Wales government, but everyone here just wants to do their part. We have around 50% of people having their first vaccinations, which is really, really good. Our school kids can get vaccinated now, the 16 to 39-year-old age group, and I believe there's lots of bookings still available for people to go and do that. But as you said, it's tough. Mental health has been an issue. That's one of the number one issues coming through to my electorate office. So we have a mental health pop-up hub coming on board to take some of that pressure off our health system and to ensure that people in my community can get the help they need. I had a Zoom with school kids the other day and they told me that they're struggling too. They want to see their friends. They want to go back to school. So we need to ensure that they can go back once we hit to that 70% vaccinated rate.
We've had heard reports, confirmed reports of just how much strain the health system is under in Sydney. Concerns about Westmead Hospital, Nepean Hospital, the pressure that's being put on the facilities there. Given what you're experiencing in your community, do you understand the reluctance from premiers and chief ministers in other parts of the country who are living with certain freedoms, that they don't want to open up and don't want to ease some of their restrictions, if not within their own jurisdictions, but further out and further afield?
Well, I was part of the work that was done around Newmarch House. Our hospital system here is absolutely ready. It was such a tough time back when we had people passing away, unfortunately, from COVID. So we never want to experience that again, of course. But the premiers have made a commitment to the Australian people. They signed up to this at National Cabinet, that when we get to 70, 80%, we get to enjoy more of the Australia that we all love and miss. And I certainly know that in my community that we want to get to that phase. And we've had one of our leading doctors, Dr. Nee Nguyen, come out and encourage our younger people again to get vaccinated. She's seeing 25% of people in ICU right now with COVID are under the age of 40. So it's really clear that people need to come out and get vaccinated, do their best, but when we get there, we should be opening up.
Marielle Smith, we've heard, of course, Labor's argument here that saying that the Prime Minister needs to step up and show some leadership in this situation. But there is an obvious question here about what was the point of Premiers and Chief Ministers agreeing on the 30th of July to the Doherty modelling, to those vaccine thresholds, if some are walking it back now?
Look, I don't think the premiers are walking back from it. I think everyone still is committed to this plan. Federal Labor is certainly committed to this plan and supporting this plan. But just because we support it doesn't mean there aren't legitimate questions that the Prime Minister needs to answer on how we move safely and quickly through these lockdowns. No one in Australia wants to see anyone else in lockdown for a moment longer than they need to be. But there are significant questions around First Nations populations who are significantly underrepresented in the vaccination rates, in terms of children who are not yet eligible for vaccines in schools. These are significant questions which will affect the effectiveness of the national plan. It's fair enough that people have questions about it, and this is the Prime Minister's lockdown. He has to answer those questions.
I mean, we do need to highlight it's not only Labor leaders who are voicing these concerns. Liberal Premier Stephen Marshall in South Australia, where you are, Senator, he might not be as explicit in his concerns, but he's certainly showing little sign of wanting to open up to the rest of the country. What can the federal government do here, and the Prime Minister in particular, do here to force any change?
Well, Australia is bigger than New South Wales, and you've got to remember that premiers in the small states and other states have been working incredibly hard to keep their population safe from COVID. They've got very real questions that they're asking about how they continue to keep those populations safe, how certain parts of this plan are going to work, how we get kids vaccinated, how we get vulnerable populations vaccinated. Everyone wants us to move through this. Everyone wants to move past lockdowns. We want to be reunited with family and friends. We can't be at the moment because the Prime Minister bungled the vaccine rollout and he bungled hotel quarantine. It's his lockdown. These are his questions to answer.
Well, while we're talking about the vaccine rollout, Melissa McIntosh, I want to ask you about the development that many are expecting to come by the end of this week. A recommendation from ATAGI, the vaccine expert task force, to allow all teenagers aged between 12 and 15 to get a vaccine. First of all, do you think that, given we are still waiting on significant proportions of the older population to get their shot, that children should wait until that cohort is fully vaccinated?
I just want to dispute the last point that was made. It's not the Prime Minister that makes a choice on who gets vaccinated, where and when. It's always been very clear that it's upon health advice. And we need to be always making decisions on this advice. So ATAGI's yet to give the all clear for 12 to 15. And we want to make sure that the vaccines are safe. And that's the approach we have always done. We all want our kids to be able to go back to school. I've got 3 children. Kids are struggling a lot, but when ATAGI's made that advice, General Frewen and the Prime Minister has been working really hard on a plan to ensure that our kids, 12 to 15, get those vaccinations. And as I said, in my local electorate, 16 to 39-year-olds can go out right now and get vaccinated.
Marielle Smith, do you think it's going to ease some of the concerns in the public about the protections in place for children once this green light is given, as many expect it will be?
Now, look, right now parents are really anxious about their kids. They don't want to see their kids become the new front line in the fight against this virus. They're calling for a plan and they're calling for reassurance. And I'm sorry, but this is just typical of the Liberals. There's always someone else to blame. There's always someone else responsible. Ultimately, Scott Morrison is the Prime Minister. He needs to provide that reassurance to Australian families about when their kids are going to get vaccinated, how it's going to work. And I understand why parents are anxious about that because he's bungled the vaccine rollout to date. They're scared he's going to bungle this one too.
Before we run out of time, because we do have to release you both for question time in the next couple of minutes, I do want to briefly touch on the issue of Afghanistan. Melissa McIntosh, the Prime Minister, keeps saying that there will be 3,000 spots under the humanitarian intake this year for people coming from Afghanistan, and he describes that as a floor and not a ceiling. Is it incumbent on the government to actually be more upfront about how many people Australia is willing to take in, given the sheer scale of the crisis gripping Afghanistan?
Well, you said it right, the sheer scale of the crisis. And right now, the government's doing everything they can to process those offshore humanitarian visas. And I'm experiencing it myself. I have an Australian family who are only just getting on a flight, and they've gone through such a dangerous experience to get home. And my heart...
We might have lost Melissa McIntosh just briefly there. Oh, actually, no, we're back. Sorry, Melissa.
Thank you. And we're processing those offshore humanitarian applications as quick as possible. So as the PM did say, it is a floor. We expect that over the months and the years, we'll be looking at getting more people in.
Marielle Smith, just briefly, how many people do you think Australia should be considering to take here?
Look, I think what's most important is that we see the government respond generously and compassionately to the needs of the people of Afghanistan. You know, this 3,000 number seems to be piecemeal. We're not sure where it's come from. We didn't meet the full cap of our refugee places last year. We really need to respond generously. There are many, many people who helped Australia in Afghanistan, who supported us and supported our mission. I want to see them brought home to Australia safely and urgently as quickly as possible. And then I want the government to respond compassionately and generously to their needs.
Well, Melissa McIntosh and Marielle Smith, we do have to leave it there. Thank you both for joining us on Capitol Hill.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.